Hello, my friends. Today we're going to listen to the informational story, I should say, The Day the Gulls Went Crazy by Susan E. Quinlan. Until they turned on him, Larry Spear was on friendly terms with his research subjects. A bird scientist, Larry had spent nearly a decade studying western gulls, trying to learn the secrets of their lives. He had visited them at their nesting islands, handled their eggs and young, and tracked them in their winter journeys along the Pacific coast. He was used to mixing with them freely. But in the summer of 1980, when Larry walked out of the research building on the southeast Falaron Island, about 30 miles west of San Francisco, the gulls were no longer friendly. In an uproar of amazing proportions, over 8,000 of the 25,000 gulls nesting on the island began screaming and dive bombing him. Many offloaded gooey white droppings with missile like accuracy. Ugh. At first, Larry thought that the angry display would die down. Instead, it got worse. The loud, piercing cries of the whirling gulls caused a frenzied stampede of stellar sea lions from their pupping area. Shaken and worried, Larry hurried back inside the house to puzzle over this new and decidedly unfriendly reception from his study subjects. Like most gulls, western gulls nest in colonies. This means that many pairs place their nests close together in a particular place. In contrast, most bird species place their nests in scattered, hidden locations. Colonial nesting is an unusual habit among birds because predators can easily locate nests placed close together and quickly eat many eggs and young. In general, colonial birds nest in places out of reach of predatory mammals, such as cliff ledges, river sandbars, and isolated ocean islands. Most colonial birds also defend their nests by mobbing predators. When one bird in a colony spots a predator, it flies up and sounds an alarm. All the nearby birds then fly up and give alarm calls too. If the alarm is strong enough, it travels through the colony like a wave. Soon, most of the birds in the colony are airborne. The alarmed birds scream, dive bomb, and harass the predator to drive it away. People who walk near colonies of nesting birds often get mobbed in the same way that a fox, a coyote, or an eagle might. The gulls' reaction to Larry was nothing more than an intense display of their natural behavior toward a feared predator. However, none of the scientists working at Southeast Falaron Island could remember a western gull's reacting to a person with such alarm. Several scientists from the Point Reyes Bird Observatory live and work on the island year round. And for the most part, the gulls had always ignored them. Even gulls nesting next to footpaths remained calm when people passed within a few feet of their nests. So the gull's mobbing response to Larry surprised everyone. Larry felt stunned by its intensity, but when he thought about it, he knew what had happened. Larry had begun studying the gulls of Southwest Falaron Island in 1971, 9 years before the mobbing incident. Since all western gulls look alike to people, Larry needed a way to identify individual birds. So he and his co-workers began putting leg bands on the gulls. Late in the nesting season each year, banders entered the gulls' nesting colony and banded chicks from as many nests as possible. Though the chicks and brooding or nesting adults occasionally protested mildly, Larry and his coworkers were able to measure and band the chicks without causing any great disturbances in the colony. Each chick was fitted with a numbered aluminum leg band from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a colored plastic leg band to indicate the hatching year. Banders carefully recorded the numbers on each metal band along with information about that chick. From 1971 to 1979, Larry and other workers banded about 18,000 Western Gull chicks. These individually identifiable birds gave Larry a chance to unravel the secrets of gull life. If he got a good look at a leg of any banded gull, Larry could read the band number, look back through his records, and tell exactly when and where on Falaron Island the bird had hatched and who its parents were. Even if he couldn't get a close look, the colored plastic band revealed the year the bird was hatched. By 1978, observations of these marked gulls were just beginning to yield some results. Interesting information. Some of the birds banded in the early 1970s returned to nest, revealing that western gulls start nesting around age 4 or 5. Larry discovered that his banded gulls eventually nested quite close to the site where they had hatched. Larry felt particularly excited when he began to learn a bit about the wandering winter life of the Falaron Island gulls. To discover their secrets, Larry went on a real life scavenger hunt each winter. He traveled up and down the Pacific coast looking for marked birds. He visited docks, canneries, restaurant parking lots, garbage dumps, and other sites where hungry gulls might be looking for a meal. It might sound easy to find some of the thousands of banded gulls, but there were probably more than 100,000 adult and young western gulls along the Pacific coast. So, Larry had to work hard to find some of his banded ones. Over the years, Larry figured out ways to increase the odds of identifying banded gulls. He began carrying buckets of dead fish in his car trunk. Whenever he saw any western gulls, he began throwing out fish parts to lure them closer in hopes of spotting any bands. When he saw a banded bird, he got out of his spotting scope and focused in on the bird's leg. Sometimes he tossed fish parts around the bird so that it would turn in a circle and allow him to read the number on its leg band. Through hard work and cleverness, Larry learned that western gull chicks from the Falaron Islands spend winters apart from their parents. He also figured out that some gull pairs enjoy separate winter vacations, with the male and female heading in different directions along the coast. Such tidbits of information made him even more eager to learn about the secret lives of gulls. Larry knew that he'd learn more and more about the gulls' lives as more and more banded chicks grew into adults and began to nest. But in 1978, he made an unsettling discovery. Many of the aluminum bands placed on birds in the early 70s had become so worn that the band numbers were now hard to read. Even worse, some aluminum bands were falling off. Years of effort and information would be lost if he didn't quickly figure out a way to replace the worn bands. Capturing and rebranding an adult gull is much more difficult than capturing a small flightless chick. Resourceful as always, Larry developed a special capture technique. He rigged up a tool using a rope noose, monofilament fishing line, and a fishing pole. Knowing the fight, knowing the fight and 2.5 pound adult gull might put up, he scared the bird off its nest and replaced its fragile eggs with dummy eggs. Next, he laid the noose around the nest and moved away. A trail of fishing line led from the noose to the fishing pole and reel in his hands. Crouching low, Larry waited for the return of the bird in need of rebanding. When the moment was right, he reeled in the line, tightening the noose around the gull's legs. As Larry expected, the recaptured gulls weren't too happy about being treated this way, and they let everyone know it. Nearby gulls reacted to the captured bird's distress by flying up and crying in alarm. Larry worked quickly. He weighed and rebanded his captive, replaced the real eggs, and then released the bird and moved away. After each localized alarm, calm returned to the colony. In 1979, Larry noosed only one or two birds every few days and captured them in well separated parts of the colony. This method kept the gall's response to a minimum. But in 1980, Larry had less time to reband birds. Under pressure, he trapped 9 different birds in 2 days, each time exciting a bit of panic. To his surprise, this rebanding effort proved too much for the gulls. When Larry set foot outside the research house the next day, thousands of gulls went berserk. Larry was extremely worried. The Gauls' reaction meant that he couldn't reband other Gauls, band any new chicks, or learn anything more about the nesting Gulls that year. Even worse, since the screaming gulls had triggered a stampede of stellar sea lions and greatly disturbed other nesting seabirds, any appearance by Larry posed a serious threat to the safety of the island's wildlife. He didn't dare step outside. Frustrated, Larry and his coworkers discussed the problem. Curiously, the gulls did not react to other people. Other researchers could come and go from the house as they pleased. Obviously, the Gauls could identify Larry in some way. In their eyes, he had some marking that made him stand out from all the other people on the island. But what was it? His hat? His coat? His body shape? His walk? An experiment seemed the best way to answer this question. Larry rigged up a disguise from spare items around the house. Instead of his usual yellow stocking cap, he wore a wide brimmed straw hat. He changed into baggy clothing that he had never worn before. And to top off the disguise, he added a green and orange Halloween mask left behind from some party. In this outfit, Larry walked out of the house, being careful to change his walk by pretending to limp. To his amazement, the colony stayed perfectly calm. Since he didn't want to wear this costume and limp around for the rest of his stay on the island, Larry began trying out different versions of his getup. He tried wearing his regular clothes but kept on the mask and straw hat and walked normally. No reaction from the Gauls. They didn't recognize him by his pants, coat, or his walk. He tried again. This time he wore his regular clothes and normal yellow hat, but still wore the mask. A mild alarm resulted. He tried once more. Still wearing the mask, he put on his regular clothes and a similar style gray hat. The Gauls stayed calm. Now Larry thought that he had figured out how the Gauls recognized him. He decided to make one final test. Back inside, he took off the mask, put on baggy clothes and a wide brimmed straw hat back on, and limped outside. Gaul pandemonium began promptly. Despite disguising his clothes and limp, the Gauls instantly recognized Larry. They knew him by his face, that same feature we use to recognize one another. Larry was forced to wear the gray cap and Halloween mask every time he left the house in 1980. Amazingly, a year later, when he returned for another nesting season, many gulls still remembered his face and again reacted in alarm. From then on, researchers always wore masks when rebanding gulls. This was necessary to prevent the gulls from identifying any other researcher as an enemy. The whole incident added a new dimension of respect for these birds, Larry says. But he adds that we shouldn't be too surprised by the ability of the gulls to recognize people by their faces. After all, he points out, gulls can recognize their mates at a distance of 100 feet and identify nesting neighbors on sight. These feats are all more impressive when you consider that the only way we humans can tell one gull from any other is by marking them with numbered bands. Clearly, bird brains are more complicated than we think. And perhaps we humans aren't so smart after all. That's something to think about the next time you watch a bird. And if you see some gulls, think twice before you disturb them. They just might remember your face. And as Larry can tell you, they dive bomb with missile like accuracy. Thanks for listening today, friends.